headlines, in yesterday's headlines, I'm seeing where China is suggesting, and it's not going over too well, China is suggesting that we talk about a currency, a world currency that isn't tied to one given nation. And I see that the European Union and American guys way up high on this phony financial food chain don't like the idea, obviously. But am I oversimplifying it or overcharacterizing it to say I have to see where I understand where China's coming from? To me, when you look at a country that's in the habit of walking in and printing $1 trillion or more at a time, isn't China basically saying to us, hey, we don't like the idea of you printing trillions of dollars out of worthless paper, handing them to us and saying, now we're even? Isn't there that aspect? I mean, when does this go from paper to money, and what's backing it?
Well, actually, there is. I actually would probably take the other side on that. I mean, right now, last week the Federal Reserve printed said that they were going to fund $300 billion worth of government bonds, long-term bonds. Now, this is very unusual. They don't usually. Basically, what they're doing is underwriting government projects. I think ideally they should underwrite Obama's stimulus package instead of selling it to the. Don't go to the Chinese, and then you have to pay them interest, and now they're getting nervous about whether they'll get paid back. Don't get your bonds from the Chinese. It should be the central bank that funds your projects. Isn't that
the best way that Obama could copy his idol Abraham Lincoln?
Exactly. Just what I'm thinking. In Malaysia, I was in Malaysia recently. I was invited to speak there, and they have a separate capital that they set up, and it's gorgeous. It looks like Disneyland. I mean, Malaysia is doing remarkably well. Mm-hmm. And the man I was sitting next to on the plane, he said, well, they must have been doing something shady because nobody knew where this money was coming from. Well, in Malaysia, they do own their own central bank, and they issue their own money. So it was former Prime Minister Mahathir who built this second capital, and he did it with government-issued money. And the country is thriving. Their only problem right now is that they're hooked into the whole foreign trade thing, and so they're going down along with the global economy. But they're just talking about how they can focus back in on their own people, sell to their own people instead of being dependent on selling to us. But the system works really well in those places that it's been tried.
And you think it will work here?
I do. I mean, it worked for 100 years before the revolution, and it's worked in Australia and New Zealand during the 30s. They owned their own central banks, and they managed to avoid the depression that affected all the rest of the world by their central banks issued money as loans, lent it to the government at 0.5% interest, mm-hmm. and then they built all sorts of things. It was
It just makes so much sense than the way it is now. Do you think that it's possible for Obama to be that kind of a person? Do you think that he's that brave? Do you think that he really has the spiritual strength and the mental strength to be about change to that degree, or not?
I actually would say yes. I mean, that's just my intuition thing. But I don't know that he knows the way out, and so that's why I'm busily, trying to throw these ideas out there to put a different light on things.
I wish he would get this book. I think everybody should buy this book and send it to the White House and tell Obama he better start reading this because, this is exactly what a lot of people are talking about, nationalizing the Fed. Is it that, or is it a little bit different than that?
Well, there's several ways you could get to that result. The direct route would be to nationalize the Fed. But that might be controversial. That might be a big battle in Congress. Wright Patman tried to get it nationalized in the 60s, and he lost. He was head of the House Banking and Currency Committee. But what he did succeed in doing was getting the Fed to agree to rebate all their profits to the government. That's why it's such a good deal for the government to get funding from the Federal Reserve, because it's interest-free, except for their costs, which is about 15%. And right now, long-term bonds are at under 3%, so that is about 0.5%, which is the same thing Australia did, and it works really well for Australia.
Well, this is Roseanne Barr, and I'm here with Johnny Argent and Ellen Hodgson Brown on KPFK. And
Ellen, could I ask, I've got another question for you. What exactly backs, when the Federal Reserve tells the Treasury Department to print up $1 trillion, what exactly is it backed by? Does the Federal Reserve per se own real estate? What is the tangible assets or strengths? You know, we've heard things like all wealth comes from land. Is this just a paper scheme? Is this just some guys in a big impressive building telling people print up paper, turn it into money, and suddenly you owe it to us? Who owes what to who, and what is it based on?
Well, that's the thing. All banking works this way. The banks never lend their own money. They never lend their depositors' money. Every single loan is created newly on the books of the banks. So here's how they do it. They always monetize something. So say you go to the bank and you want a mortgage, and let's say it's $500,000. So they will write that up on one side of their books as an asset to themselves because you have signed this paper that says that you will pay them over time. So it's a negotiable instrument with a present value. It's an income-generating asset to them. Then they write the same $500,000 on the other side of their books as a liability to themselves because they have agreed to that when you write checks on that account that they will pay out to whoever you've written the check to. So at the bottom it comes out to zero. So they say their books balance, they haven't created anything. But in fact, that $500,000 that you're going to write checks on goes out into the economy, and that's where our money comes from. So what the Fed has done is the very same thing. Because the banks are frozen and they haven't been able to make the loans that they used to make, and this all goes back to the Bank for International Settlements, it's due to a foreign banking power that has imposed their rules on our banks. The Fed has stepped in and is now acting like a commercial bank, something it has never done before. It has never funded private corporations, banks, credit card companies, all those things that they're now talking about making loans to. I think that's actually a good thing because they are substituting for the private banking system. And as I say, their profits go back to the government. So really it's all just math. It's the same deal that Benjamin Franklin said that what made our country great was ready credit, or he called it ready money. But it's actually ready credit that has made us great for 300 years. The ability to, you have a dream and you can monetize it. You know, you go in and say, this is my plan and this is how I'm going to pay it back, and trust me to with your materials and your labor and stuff, and I will build the thing and I will pay it back out of the proceeds.
I like that you call Greenspan the Wizard of Oz, too. I really like that in the book where, you know, we were talking about Greenspan today on the drive over, and he said, Johnny told me that he read that Greenspan said he had no idea that the most despicable and greedy people would, be so lemming-like as to destroy their own demographic.
Well, he said that he made his primary mistake was thinking that these guys who were shepherding these people's investments, he figured that they would be looking out for their clients, etc. And instead they jumped in.
What do you think of that?
Okay.
Well, that's called fiduciary duty, and they're supposed to have a fiduciary duty to their clients. But the problem is that they mixed up, they repealed Glass-Steagall in the 90s under Clinton. Uh-huh. So they mixed up commercial banking and investment banking. So that allowed the same banks, a different department of the same bank, to bet against their own clients.
Ellen, can I ask you?
That's amazing that, hold on a minute. That's amazing that you said that about Clinton, because a lot of people don't know that or even want to hear that, right? I mean, doesn't it all just go back to Clinton, this whole collapse?
The deregulation, you mean?
Yeah, it does. But then I heard that he said, gee, I thought once I got to be president, I'd be making the decisions. I mean, it's not clear that any president, they kind of have to do what they're...
Right. So does Obama, right?
Yeah, unless, well, that's what I'm saying. It looks to me like they're doing this sort of stealthily. Lincoln got killed, Kennedy got killed. You don't want to just stand up and say, we're going to destroy the Wall Street banking system and set up our own. You want to do it discreetly.